In this video, we'll talk about one-dimensional array. Now, what comes to your mind when you see something like this? Java, Python, C++, JavaScript. Perhaps one of the things you thought of was, these are all programming languages, and you'll be definitely correct. Another thing that would probably come to your mind is that they are all strings, because they are all in quotes. And so we can say these are all programming languages and they are all string data type. Probably one more thing you probably thought of was there are 4 programming languages here. How about this one? What comes to your mind when you think of this? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You probably thought, again, yeah, these are all numbers that are divisible by 2. And there are 5 of them. And again, you'll be correct. All of them are numbers. And so we can say these are even numbers between 2 and 10 inclusive. And they are all integer data type. How about this one? What comes to your mind? You probably thought, oh yeah, these are all grid letters, right? And again, you'll be correct if you thought that way. But you probably also thought, well, these are strings because they are in quote. And they are not characters because we see that some of them have more than one character, and so they are categorized as strings. And of course, it also doesn't have a single quote. So we know that they are all strings. Again, you'll be correct because all of them are student grid letters, but of string data type. So let's take a look at this, for instance. We can say that this is a collection of programming languages of type string. And if we look at this one, we can say it's a collection of even numbers between 2 and 10, inclusive of type integer. And if we look at this one, we can say it's a collection of student grid letters of type string. Please pay attention to how we are bringing some of the terminologies in. Type, right? Collection. Now, an array is a collection of elements of the same type. And they are stored in a row, and each element is accessed using an index. Let's see what this means. But before we do that, I need to pause and think, what other examples can you think of besides the programming languages, grid letters, and even numbers examples? What other examples can you think of? Pause and think. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into this definition. We said an array is a collection of elements of the same type. And let's focus on this collection to begin with. A collection is just a group of items kept together in one place. And so what we mean by array is that an array is always a group of something. So if we look at these programming languages, we've grouped them together in one box, right? Java, Python, C++, JavaScript, all of them are boxed together. They are a group of programming languages. And so we can say they're a group of programming languages of the string type, something we already established before. But now let's even look a little bit further at what these elements are. So elements, in the definition we gave before of what collection is, a group of items. Now, items there is synonymous to elements. And so when we think of items here in this array, we are thinking of Java, Python, C++, JavaScript. Those are the elements. Those are the items. And so you think of how many items do we have? We have 4 of them. And all of these are called elements. So we have 4 elements in this collection, in this group of items. We have 4 elements. And which one is the first one? Java. What's the third one? C++. And so this is element 1, which is the first element. We have element 2, which is Python. Element 3 is C++. Element 4, which you can also say fourth element, is JavaScript. Now let's look at this example. For the elements, we start numbering at 1, and we walk all the way through to the end of that array. And so in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, all through to 11. The number there is what we refer to as elements. And we can say that the total number of elements in this array is 11. And so let's say we have a question that says, what is the value of the element 9 in the array? Or what is the value of the 9th element in the array? All you just need to do is just to look at, number it from 1. When we're talking about elements, again, take note, please. When we're talking about elements, we're numbering from 1. And so if you number from 1, which of these arrays, which of these strings is the 9th one? That's what this question is essentially asking. And if you look at the 9th string, what do we have? D plus. And so that would be the answer to this question. And the total number of elements in an array is the same as the length of the array. And so if we number from 1 through 11, we can say that the total number of elements is 11. And we can say that the length of this array is also 11. Now we've seen collections, we've seen elements. Let's look at this last part of this particular definition section, the same type. We know that we have, broadly speaking, we have 2 different types in Java. The first one is the primitive. And an array, indeed, can be of a primitive data type. So it can be byte, it can be an array of short, it can be an array of int, it can be an array of long, it can be an array of float, it can be an array of double, of char, of boolean. But it could also be a reference data type. So it could be string, it could even be an array, and it could be a class. So take, for instance, we have something like this. This would be impossible. Now, the key word here is, I want you to notice, the same. So if you look at Java, the type here is string. However, the type here is an integer because it's a number. The type here is a string, the type here is an integer, the type here is a string, the type here is an integer. And perhaps you might be wondering, does this person really meant to store, maybe, for instance, he meant, oh, Java is the first language, C++ is the second one, Python is the third one. And if that was the notion, this would still be wrong because you cannot have different types in an array. An array, you have just a single type. It has to be the same type. Take note of this. And so we cannot even have something like this. And by the way, string is a reference type, just as you see here. And now you have primitive type, so you can have that. It's not possible. Primitive reference. Reference primitive. Reference primitive. Reference primitive. That's not possible. But beyond that, we can't even have something like this, where we have 1 and we have 2.0. 1 is an integer. 2.0 is double. 3 is an integer. 3.5 is double. 4 is an integer. 4.0 is double. Even though both of them are primitive, we cannot have something like this. It has to be of the same data type. And so if we use integer here, we want to also use integer everywhere else. Please take note of that. Now let's look at the other part of this definition of arrays. They are stored in a row. So what does a row look like? When you take any of these lists, remember we had this Java, Python, C++, JavaScript. Now you want to store them. We store them in such a way that we break them up. And so when you have something like this, they are stored in a row, and that singular structure here that you see, this is a row. And what we mean is that it has a linear data structure, and that's because they are arranged in a sequential order. So think of it like linear line. It's just on one line. One key thing to take note of when working with arrays is that arrays are of fixed length. And what that means is that they are immutable. Once you create an array, the size cannot be changed. And so you would agree with me that it's very important. In fact, you should know the length of an array before you even use it at all. Before you initialize, before you create an array, you should know the length of that array. And the last thing here is that elements are accessed one at a time. So this is not like a bunch of things where you just can access all together and say, give me everything in the array. And we'll see this in actual code very soon. So if we have this in an array, we can't just say, hey, I need everything. Give me everything in that array. That's not possible. We access the elements one at a time. Now let's go to the next part of the definition that says each element is accessed using an index. What is an index? So we saw that for elements, you start numbering at 1. For indexes, you start numbering at 0. And so if we number at 0, we have 0, 1, 2, 3. And what that means is that the highest index is 1 less than the length of the array. Now, the length of the array here is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the length of the array, and that's the number of the elements in this array. So we can say the total elements in this array is 4. Now, if we take 4 minus 1, that would give us the highest index in the array. 4 minus 1 is 3. And the reason for that is because indexes start counting at 0. Now I'll say pause the video and attempt the following questions. We have this structure here, Java, Python, C++, JavaScript. And the question says, how many elements does this array have? What is the value of the element 3 in the array? And what is the element at index 3? And we have this other one. How many elements? About the same question. So pause this video and attempt this question. And when you're done with it, come back and watch this video. All right, welcome back. I hope you took some time to practice or took some time to find the solution to the question. We have Java, Python, C++, JavaScript. How many elements does this array have? First, we want to organize this in a row by breaking it up, right? And once we've done that, to get the number of elements that the array has, we want to start numbering at 1. And so we say 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we know what the answer is because that's the total element. And we say the number of elements that the array has is 4. Let's go to the next question. What is the value of the element 3 in the array? Now, we want to look at element 3 and look at what the value is. And so we know what element 3 is. That's the third element. That's element 3. But what's the value there? That's C++. And so we say the answer to the next question is C++. How about the third one? It says, what is the value of the element at index 3? Take note of these things because they might be confusing, but they can be confusing. But if you pay attention to it, you'll understand it. Elements start counting at 1, indexes start counting at 0. So let's count. We have 0, 1, 2, 3. And now we want to look for the index 3, which is this one. And now we say the answer is JavaScript because that's the element. That's the value of that element at index 3. All right. So did you attempt the questions? Share your solution to questions 4 to 6 in the comment section. That might be helpful for someone else. Now, what have we learned so far? If you have something like this, grid letters, we can say the elements we start numbering the elements at 1. Of course, we first break it up into a row, right? We break it up into a row, and that's why we have all these different sections. We break it up into a row, and then we number the elements starting at 1. We number the indexes starting at 0. And now a recap. An array is a collection of elements of the same type. And I hope now you understand what collection means. You understand what elements mean. You understand when we say the same type. They are stored in a row. We've also seen that. And each element is accessed using an index. All right, that'll be all for now. I'll see you in the next one when we shall talk about writing a one-dimensional array in Java. See you there.